They say that when you brush past death, you leave a little piece of yourself behind. I didn't leave anything behind on the rain-slicked asphalt of Route 4. Instead, I brought something back. Modern Queen Tales presents The Ones No One Should See. Chapter 1, The Awakening. I woke up to the sterile, stinging scent of bleach and the rhythmic, hollow beep of a heart monitor. My head throbbed, a dull, heavy ache pulsing behind my eyes, but as I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, the doctor assured my frantic parents that I was incredibly lucky. A mild concussion, a few scrapes, and a bruised rib. The car that had swerved onto the sidewalk and clipped me had sent me flying, but I had miraculously avoided any lasting physical injuries, or so they thought. Call me Sawako, by the way. Sawako Fukuda. It was my second night in the hospital when the world shifted. My parents had finally gone home to rest, and the ward was cloaked in that heavy, unnatural quiet that only hospitals possess. I was staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the lingering headache, when the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath plumed in the air, a tiny white cloud in the dimness. Then, I heard the weeping. It was a wet, ragged sound, coming from the corner of the room near the privacy curtain. I slowly turned my head, my neck stiff. Crouching there was a woman. Her hospital gown was soaked in dark, viscous fluid, and her hair hung in matted clumps over her face. As I watched, frozen in absolute terror, she slowly lifted her head. Where her eyes should have been, there were only hollow, dark voids. She reached a trembling, translucent hand toward me, her jaw unhinging in a silent, agonizing scream. I squeezed my eyes shut, burying my face in the scratchy hospital pillow, and pressed the call button until my thumb ached. When the night nurse bustled in, turning on the lights and asking what was wrong, the room was empty. The temperature was normal. But I could still smell it, a faint, metallic stench of old blood and ozone. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I realized the horrifying truth. The accident had broken something inside me, or perhaps opened a door that was meant to stay firmly shut. I could see them, the lingering dead, the spirits, the ghosts. They were everywhere. They clung to the handrails on the subway, their faces twisted in eternal boredom or despair. They lingered at intersections, repeating the last frantic moments of their lives. Some were mere shadows, harmless echoes of the past. Others were twisted, grotesque things born of malice and regret, radiating a cold, nauseating aura. I quickly learned the most important rule of my new, terrifying reality. Never let them know you can see them. If I made eye contact, if I flinched when a mangled spirit dragged itself across my path, they would notice. And when they noticed, they swarmed. They were desperate for acknowledgement, for a connection to the living world. I spent my days walking a tightrope of feigned ignorance. I learned to look straight through the horrors that haunted the streets of my town. I trained my face into a mask of placid indifference, even when a spirit with half a face was screaming inches from my ear. I just wanted to be a normal 17-year-old girl. I wanted to worry about college entrance exams, the upcoming cultural festival, and what to eat for lunch. I wanted nothing to do with the supernatural. I decided my best strategy was to simply ignore them until, hopefully, they faded away. It was a flawless plan. Until Misato got involved. Chapter 2. The Tunnel. Misato had been my best friend since middle school. She was everything I was not. Loud, impulsive, fearless, and currently obsessed with the occult. While I was actively trying to ignore the very real, very horrifying spirits surrounding us, Misato was spending her weekends trying to find fake ones. Come on, Sawako. It's an abandoned railway tunnel. People say they hear disembodied voices echoing from it at night, Misato pleaded, tugging on the sleeve of my school uniform. We were walking home, the late afternoon sun casting long golden shadows across the pavement. Misato, we have a math test on Friday. We shouldn't be wandering around old structural hazards, I reasoned, keeping my eyes fixed firmly ahead. I deliberately ignored the shadowy, elongated figure draped over the telephone pole to our left. You're no fun since the accident, she pouted, though her eyes were bright with mischief. Just a quick peek. If we don't see anything, I'll buy you a crepe. The expensive kind with the strawberries and cheesecake bites. I sighed. I was weak when it came to sugar, and Misato knew it. Fine. 10 minutes. Then we leave. The abandoned tunnel was located at the edge of town, half swallowed by overgrown vines and dense, encroaching woods. As we approached the gaping dark mouth of the tunnel, every instinct I possessed screamed at me to run. The air here didn't just feel heavy, it felt thick, almost gelatinous. The familiar metallic scent of ozone and rot was overpowering. "Isn't it wonderfully creepy?" Misato whispered, clicking on her heavy-duty flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating damp brick walls covered in faded graffiti. "It's dirty," I muttered, hugging my arms around myself. I kept my gaze firmly on the ground, terrified of what I might see if I looked up into the darkness. We ventured about 50 feet inside. The temperature dropped drastically. Misato was chattering excitedly about cold spots and EMF readings, completely oblivious to the fact that the shadows dancing on the walls were not caused by her flashlight. They were writhing. "Okay, Misato, we saw it. Let's go." "Wait, I think I see something further in." Misato took a sudden, eager step forward. There was a sickening crack, followed by a sharp cry of pain. Misato crumpled to the damp gravel-strewn ground, her flashlight rolling away and casting a chaotic spinning beam of light against the walls. "Misato!" I rushed forward, dropping to my knees beside her. "My ankle!" she gasped, her face pale in the ambient light. I stepped on a loose rock. It twisted. "Oh, it hurts, Sawako. I don't think I can stand." Panic flared in my chest. Okay, let me look." I reached for her ankle, but as I did, my gaze involuntarily flicked upwards. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The tunnel was infested. Drawn by Misato's sudden burst of pain and fear, the shadows were peeling themselves away from the damp bricks. They were horrendous, misshapen creatures. Some resembled bloated, drowned corpses. Others were amalgamation of limbs and teeth, crawling across the curved ceiling like monstrous spiders. Their eyes, dozens of glowing, hateful pinpricks, were fixed entirely on us. They were murmuring, a cacophony of overlapping, desperate whispers that scraped against the inside of my skull. "So warm. Give it to us. So much pain. Let us taste. Sawako?" Misato asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you looking like that? What's wrong?" I couldn't warn her. If I spoke to them, if I acknowledged them, they would frenzy. I swallowed hard, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. "Nothing, just trying to figure out how to carry you." But they were closing in. A creature with long, skeletal fingers reached out, its translucent nails grazing Misato's hair. Misato shivered, rubbing her arms. "Did the wind just pick up? It's freezing." It wasn't wind. It was the deathly chill of a spirit trying to drain her life force. I was about to collapse. The fear was a physical weight, crushing my lungs. There were too many. We were trapped in the dark, and I was entirely helpless. I squeezed my eyes shut, preparing for the icy, suffocating grasp of the spirits. Then, a voice cut through the darkness. It was calm, low, and perfectly steady. "Shiro, dinner!" Misato shrieked as a sudden, violent gust of wind whipped through the tunnel, sending debris flying. But I didn't just feel the wind, I saw it. A streak of brilliant, blinding white light entered the tunnel at an impossible speed. It was beautiful and terrifying, all at once. The light zigzagged through the enclosed space, leaving a trail of shimmering sparks in its wake. Every time the light collided with one of the grotesque spirits, the creature let out a high-pitched, agonizing wail before dissolving into a cloud of dark ash. Snap, snap, snap. The light was systematically snatching the spirits, devouring them one by one in a matter of seconds. The remaining creatures, sensing the overwhelming power of the light, scattered, fleeing into the walls and deeper into the earth, their hateful whispers turning into shrieks of terror. As the last spirit vanished, the streak of light slowed, gracefully circling back toward the entrance of the tunnel. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. A boy walked out of the gloom, holding a sleek, black flashlight. He looked to be about 19, tall and lean, dressed in dark cargo pants and a simple, black long-sleeved shirt. He had messy, raven-black hair that fell slightly into his eyes, and a face that was strikingly, almost unfairly, handsome. His features were sharp, aristocratic, and currently set in a deep scowl. The streak of light flew toward him and landed lightly on his broad shoulder. The blinding glow faded, revealing its true form. It wasn't just a ball of light. It was a majestic white bird, resembling a falcon but infinitely more ethereal, with a brilliant, glowing crest and a long, silken tail that seemed to drift like smoke. "What do you two think you're doing wandering around in a dark, unstable tunnel?" the boy demanded, his voice carrying an authoritative edge that made me flinch. "It's dangerous. You could get seriously hurt." Misato, recovering from her shock, stared at him, wide-eyed. We were just exploring." I tripped. The boy sighed, a sound of profound annoyance, and walked over to us. He crouched beside Misato, shining his light on her swelling ankle. He smelled of pine needles, rain, and something sharp and electric, like the air right after a lightning strike. "It's a bad sprain," he said, his long, calloused fingers probing the joint with surprising gentleness. Misato winced, but didn't pull away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a roll of athletic tape, and expertly wrapped her ankle, securing it tightly. "Can you stand?" he asked. He stood up and offered Misato his hand, pulling her to her feet while she leaned heavily against him. I was still frozen on the ground, staring, not at the boy, but at the bird on his shoulder. It tilted its head, its intelligent golden eyes fixing directly on me. It ruffled its luminous feathers, letting out a soft, satisfied trill. It had just eaten a dozen ghosts, and now it was preening. The boy turned his gaze to me. His eyes were dark, almost black, and intensely sharp. For a split second, as his eyes met mine, his brow furrowed in a minute expression of surprise. He looked from me, to the bird, and back to me. He knows I can see it, I thought, panic rising anew. "Come on," he said abruptly, breaking the eye contact. He hauled Misato's arm over his shoulder. "I'm calling a cab." "You're going to the hospital." He half-carried Misato out of the tunnel, and I scrambled to my feet, following closely behind, desperate to get out of the cursed place. When we reached the main road, a cab was already pulling up. He must have texted for one while bandaging Misato. He helped Misato into the back seat and turned to me. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice raspy. My heart was still hammering against my ribs. "But what were you doing in there? With a flashlight?" I couldn't bring myself to mention the bird. His expression remained perfectly blank, a polite, detached mask slipping seamlessly over his features. "It's a shortcut to get to work. Be more careful next time, kids." He closed the cab door before I could say another word. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back through the rear window. He was standing on the side of the road, watching us go. The majestic white bird was still perched on his shoulder, glowing softly in the twilight. Misato leaned back against the seat with a dramatic sigh. "Did you feel that crazy wind? And who was that guy? He was gorgeous. So rude. But mysteriously rude, you know?" I nodded absently, my hands trembling in my lap. Misato had only felt the wind. She hadn't seen the light, or the bird, or the spirits. But I had. And more importantly, that boy knew I had. Chapter 3. The Tea House. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blinding streak of light devouring those grotesque horrors. But more prominently, I saw the boy's dark, piercing eyes boring into mine. He had looked me dead in the eye when the spirits fled. He hadn't dismissed my terror as a reaction to the dark or Misato's injury. He had evaluated me. The next morning, a Saturday, I left Misato a text checking on her ankles sprained, crutches for a week, and set out. I needed answers. I couldn't go back to ignoring the supernatural world when I had just witnessed someone actively fighting it. He had mentioned the tunnel was a shortcut to his job. The tunnel led from the residential district straight through the woods toward the eastern edge of town, an area known exclusively for its sprawling, affluent estates and traditional establishments. I spent 3 hours walking the perimeter of the eastern district, looking for any sign of him. I was about to give up, my feet aching in my sneakers, when I saw it, through the imposing wooden gates of the Shofuso, a highly exclusive, traditional Japanese tea house. I spotted a flash of white. I crept closer, peering through the ornate bamboo fencing. The tea house grounds were immaculate. Lush, manicured pine trees framed a large koi pond, the gravel paths raked into perfect, sweeping patterns, and there he was, He was wearing traditional, dark blue workers' clothes. The sleeves rolled up to reveal toned forearms. He was kneeling on the grass, meticulously pruning a bonsai tree with a pair of sharp shears. He looked incredibly out of place, too young and too sharply intense to be a humble gardener. But it was what was perched on a low stone lantern nearby that confirmed I had found the right person, the white bird. In the daylight, it was even more breathtaking, its feathers shimmering with an iridescent sheen. I took a deep breath, pushed the wooden gate open, and stepped onto the gravel. The sound of my footsteps made him pause. He didn't turn around immediately. He simply snipped another branch, his movements precise. "The tea house doesn't open to the public until noon," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet garden. "And reservations are required. I'm not here for tea," I said, my voice braver than I felt. He finally turned, wiping his hands on a towel at his waist. When he saw me, his polite customer service expression vanished entirely. His jaw tightened, and he let out a long, slow breath. "You," he stated. "It wasn't a question. Me," I confirmed, stepping closer. The white bird let out a happy chirp and fluttered over, landing lightly on the boy's shoulder again. It rubbed its beak against his cheek. "That shortcut excuse was a lie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There is no way. Walking through an abandoned, haunted tunnel is a convenient commute. Who are you? And what is that?" I pointed directly at the bird. Genki stared at me for a long, heavy moment. He looked around the empty garden, then gestured with a jerk of his head toward a secluded wooden pavilion near the koi pond. "Come here, before someone sees you making a scene." I followed him to the pavilion. Once we were shielded from the main building by the foliage, he turned to face me. He crossed his arms over his chest, making him look even broader and more intimidating. "My name is Genki," he said flatly. "And since you are stubbornly persistent and evidently not completely blind, I'll drop the act. You're entirely too much trouble for your own good, do you know that?" "Excuse me?" I bristled, my fear momentarily overridden by indignation. "I didn't ask to be attacked by creepy tunnel monsters." "No, you didn't," Genki agreed, his dark eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. "The scent of pine and rain was stronger now, but you might as well have rolled out a red carpet for them. Do you have any idea what you look like to the things in the dark?" I swallowed hard, backing up until my shoulders hit the wooden railing of the pavilion. I just try to ignore them." Genki let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Ignore them? That's your survival strategy? You're an idiot." Before I could protest the insult, the white bird flew from his shoulder and landed on the railing right beside my hand. Up close, I could see that it wasn't made of flesh and blood. It was composed of pure, vibrating energy. "This is Shirou," Genki said, his tone shifting from angry to analytical. "He isn't a bird. He's a Shikigami, a familiary spirit. And I am a Yureigari, a ghost hunter, though the title is heavily romanticized. My family, the Kusanagi, have been culling malevolent spirits for centuries. Though, we're a bit strapped for cash these days, hence the gardening job." "A ghost hunter," I repeated, the words feeling ridiculous in my mouth. "Like in the anime?" "Less dramatic, more dangerous," Genki corrected dryly. He leaned in closer, trapping me between his arms as he placed his hands on the railing on either side of me. My breath hitched. He was so close I could see the individual lashes framing his intense dark eyes. "Now, let's talk about you," he murmured, his voice dropping to a low, serious tenor. "When I saw you in that tunnel, I was shocked. Normal humans can't see Shirou's true form. They just see a gust of wind or a trick of the light. But you saw him." "I was in a car accident a few months ago," I blurted out, unable to hold his gaze. I looked at his chest instead. I hit my head. "Ever since I woke up, I've been able to see them." Genki's expression darkened. He lifted a hand, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to touch me. Instead, his fingers hovered an inch from my forehead. I felt a strange, tingling warmth radiate from his palm. "It wasn't just a concussion," Genki said softly, pulling his hand back. "Every human has a seal that keeps their spiritual energy contained. Your accident, it cracked your seal. Your latent energy is leaking out. Is that bad? I whispered. To ghosts? Genki stepped back, though his gaze remained fiercely locked on mine. To ghosts, you smell like a 5-star buffet. You are a beacon of pure, raw life force. The things in that tunnel weren't just passing by, they were actively hunting you. And as your seal continues to deteriorate, bigger, nastier things are going to come looking for a meal. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. The horrible, visceral memory of the spirits in the tunnel came rushing back. The whispering, the skeletal fingers. Can you fix it? I asked, my voice trembling. Can you seal it back? Genki sighed, running a hand through his messy black hair. Eventually. It takes time, specific rituals, and a lot of energy to repair a shattered soul seal. But in the meantime, he looked at me, a calculating gleam entering his eyes. In the meantime, what? If you stay like this, walking around unprotected, you won't last a week. Genki warned, his tone brutally honest. Something will drag you into the dark and drain you dry. I squeezed my eyes shut, a tear escaping down my cheek. I just wanted to be normal. I didn't want to be a buffet for monsters. But, Genki continued, his voice softening slightly. I have a proposition. I opened my eyes. What kind of proposition? Genki gestured to the majestic white bird, which was currently nibbling affectionately on my sleeve. Shirou is a spirit eater. He thrives on the very malevolent energy that is trying to consume you. But finding strong, malicious spirits to feed him is time-consuming. I have to track them, bait them, hunt them. He looked back at me, a slow, almost predatory smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You, on the other hand, attract them just by breathing. So, here is the deal. I will act as your bodyguard. I will stick to you, protect you, and make sure nothing touches you until I can fix your seal. And in exchange? I asked, though I already knew the answer. In exchange, you act as his lure, Genki said. You draw them out. Shirou eats them. We all win. It was insane. It was dangerous. I was agreeing to be live bait for terrifying spectral monsters. But looking into Genki's confident, unwavering eyes, and feeling the protective warmth radiating from the small spirit bird beside me, I knew I didn't have a choice. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Deal. Genki's smirk widened into a genuine, devastatingly handsome smile. Good girl. Now, give me your phone. Why? I asked, startled. If I'm going to be your bodyguard, I need to be with you, Genki said, plucking my phone from my unresisting hand and typing his number in. Which means, starting Monday, I'll be picking you up for school. Be ready at 7:30. And try not to get eaten over the weekend. Chapter 4. The Lure. If I thought seeing ghosts was stressful, it was nothing compared to the absolute chaos that became my life on Monday morning. True to his word, Genki was leaning against the stone wall outside my apartment complex at exactly 7:30. He had ditched the traditional gardener's clothes for a pair of dark tailored jeans, a white t-shirt, and a black leather jacket that made him look like he had stepped off a movie poster. Shirou, invisible to everyone else, was perched regally on his shoulder. As I walked out, clutching my school bag like a shield, Genki pushed himself off the wall. Morning bait, he greeted smoothly. My name is Sawako, I grumbled, though my face felt unreasonably hot. Right, Sawako. He fell into step beside me. He was significantly taller than me, his long strides forcing me to walk a little faster. The walk to school was distracting. I was hyper-aware of his proximity. The way his shoulder brushed mine, the way he casually scanned the alleys and rooftops, his dark eyes sharp and assessing. A few low-level spirits lurked near the bus stop, but the moment they sensed Genki and the hungry presence of the Shikigami on his shoulder, they vanished into thin air. It was the first time in months I felt genuinely safe walking down the street. But that safety came with a severe social cost. When we arrived at the gates of my high school, the bustling crowd of students collectively froze. Conversations died. Dozens of eyes turned toward us. I was notoriously average. I had a small circle of friends, average grades, and completely unremarkable looks. suddenly showing up with an older, incredibly handsome, bad boy aesthetic guy walking protectively by my side was the equivalent of dropping a bomb in the courtyard. "Who is that?" I heard a girl from my homeroom whisper loudly to her friend. "Is that Sawako? No way. Are they dating?" Misato, who was leaning on her crutches near the shoe lockers, dropped her jaw. She hobbled over as fast as she could. "Sawako! What? Who?" She looked at Genki, her eyes wide, recognizing him from the night of the tunnel. "Tunnel guy!" Genki offered Misato a charming, entirely fake smile. The polite mask was back. "Good morning. I'm Genki. I'm a friend of Sawako's. I was just making sure she got to school safely." He turned to me, reaching out to gently tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my skin, sending a jolt of electricity down my spine. I stared at him, my eyes wide with panic. What was he doing? "I'll pick you up after practice," Genki said, his voice loud enough for the eavesdropping girls to hear. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, and whispered, so only I could hear, "There's a Class 3 spirit hovering near the gym. Don't go near it. I'll handle it later." He pulled back, gave me a heart-stopping wink, and walked away, leaving me standing in a sea of aggressive whispers and Misato's frantic interrogation. For the next 2 weeks, this became my life. Genki was relentless. He walked me to school, he met me for lunch, bringing beautifully prepared, expensive-looking bento boxes he claimed were leftovers from the tea house, and he walked me home. To the rest of the school, it looked like I had bagged the most devoted, mysterious, and insanely attractive older boyfriend in the city. The envy was palpable. Girls glared at me in the hallways. Boys gave Genki a wide berth. Misato demanded details I couldn't give her, spinning wild romantic fantasies about how we met. The reality was far less romantic and far more terrifying. I was the bait. And it worked flawlessly. My cracked seal was drawing spirits in like moths to a flame. Genki would take me to romantic spots, an abandoned park at twilight, the dusty archives of the local library, the dark alley behind the karaoke box, and we would wait. The moment the temperature dropped and the malicious whispers started, Genki would step in front of me. His aura would change, shifting from relaxed to lethally focused. He would command Shirou with a single sharp word, and the majestic white bird would become a streak of devastating light, tearing the spirits apart and feasting on their energy. I hated the fear. I hated the cold, creeping dread when the spirits manifested. But I didn't hate being with Genki. Behind his arrogant exterior and constant teasing about me being his walking buffet, there was a fierce, unwavering protectiveness. When a particularly aggressive spirit, a towering, multi-limbed monstrosity, managed to get too close to me at the old shrine, Genki hadn't just used Shirou. He had physically thrown himself between me and the creature, using a glowing, inscribed talisman to banish it, taking a nasty spectral burn to his forearm in the process. He had simply bandaged it with a shrug, told me I was clumsy for tripping, and bought me ice cream on the way home. He was infuriating, he was arrogant, he was absolutely breathtaking. And as the days bled into weeks, I realized with a sinking heart that the fake dating act was becoming entirely too real for me. I was falling for my bodyguard. Chapter 5. The Confession. It happened on a Friday evening, nearly a month after the incident in the tunnel. We were sitting on the roof of my apartment building. The city lights stretched out below us like a sea of stars. It was a clear, crisp night. Shirou was perched happily on the railing, fat and glowing with energy after having devoured a nasty cluster of spirits hovering near the local cemetery. Genki was sitting beside me, his long legs stretched out, an open grimoire resting in his lap. He had been chanting softly for the past hour, tracing intricate glowing symbols in the air that faded into my chest. "There," Genki finally said, exhaling a long, tired breath. He closed the heavy book. "It's done," I blinked, touching my chest. "What's done?" "The seal," Genki said, turning to look at me. The harsh lines of his face were softened by the moonlight. He looked exhausted but relieved. "It's repaired, fully closed. You aren't leaking spiritual energy anymore." I sat in silence, processing his words. "So, I'm not a 5-star buffet anymore?" "No," Genki chuckled softly. "You're just regular, Unappetizing Sawako again. To them, anyway. And I won't attract them? Not any more than a normal person. You'll still see the occasional low-level ghost because of your lingering sensitivity. But the big ones? The ones that want to eat you? They won't even know you're there. Relief washed over me, so intense it made my knees weak. I was safe. I could walk down the street without the constant, paralyzing fear of being hunted. I was normal again, but as the relief settled, a cold, heavy ache replaced it in my chest. If I wasn't the bait anymore, our deal was over. Genki didn't need me to feed Shirou. He didn't need to walk me to school, or bring me lunch, or stand between me and the dark. The fake dating, the stolen glances, the protective touches, it was all going to end. I see, I said, looking down at my hands. I fought to keep my voice steady, to hide the sudden sting of tears behind my eyes. So, I guess this is it. Contract fulfilled. Genki was quiet for a long time. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I couldn't bear to look at him. I started to gather my jacket, preparing to stand up and walk away before I humiliated myself by crying, "Sawako." His hand closed gently over my wrist, stopping me. His grip was warm and firm. I finally looked up. Genki was staring at me, his dark eyes intense and unreadable. The arrogant, teasing smirk was entirely gone. "You think I'm just going to walk away?" he asked, his voice rough. "Why wouldn't you?" I countered, my defenses rising to cover my hurt. "You said it yourself. You needed a lure for Shirou." "I'm not a lure anymore." "You don't have to pretend to be my boyfriend just to keep an eye on your food source." Genki winced slightly, his thumb brushing over the pulse point on my wrist. "Sawako, you really are an idiot sometimes." "Hey, do you really think I dragged you into all this just for bait?" Genki shifted closer, the scent of pine and rain wrapping around me. "Shirou and I were surviving perfectly fine before I met you. We didn't need a lure." I frowned in confusion. "But," you said. I lied. Genki interrupted quietly. He let go of my wrist, reaching up to cut my cheek. His calloused fingers were incredibly gentle against my skin. "Or rather, I told a half-truth to give you a reason to let me stay close to you." My heart gave a violent stutter in my chest. "I don't understand." Genki sighed, his gaze dropping to my lips for a fleeting second before meeting my eyes again. "Do you remember when you were in the hospital? The night you first saw a spirit?" A chill ran down my spine at the memory. "Yes, the weeping woman. I was there," Genki said softly. My eyes widened. "What?" I was tracking that spirit. "It was a nasty one, feeding on the sorrow of the patients. I entered your room to banish it, and when I did, I saw you watching me." Genki smiled, a small, self-deprecating curve of his lips. "Normal humans can't see me when I'm manipulating spiritual energy. But you sat up in your hospital bed, terrified, and looked right at me, right at Shirou." He leaned in closer, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "I realized your seal was cracked. I knew what would happen. I knew you would become a target. So, I started watching over you, following you, making sure nothing got too close while you recovered." The pieces fell into place. The feeling of being watched on the train, the times when the air would suddenly clear of the heavy, oppressive dread of the spirits. It hadn't been luck. The tunnel, I breathed out, was no accident. Genki confirmed. "I felt the surge in your energy when your friend got hurt. I knew the spirits would swarm. I barely made it in time." He rested his forehead against mine. I could feel the heat radiating from him, feel the steady, rapid thumping of his heart echoing my own. "I proposed the lure deal because you were stubborn and terrified, and it was the only way I could think of to stay by your side, 24/7, to protect you without sounding like a completely unhinged stalker." Genki confessed, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "I didn't pretend to be your boyfriend for Shirou, Sawako. I did it because I wanted to be." My breath hitched. All the fear, the anxiety, the sadness of the past month melted away, leaving only a dizzying, effervescent joy. You like me?" I whispered, needing to hear it plainly. Genki let out a soft, exasperated laugh, his breath ghosting over my lips. I've spent the last month fighting off literal demons for you, carrying your heavy school bags and glaring at every teenage boy who looks in your general direction. Yes, Sawako. I am completely embarrassingly obsessed with you. I couldn't help it. A huge, beaming smile broke across my face. I reached up, grabbing the lapels of his leather jacket, and pulled him the last few inches toward me. Good, I murmured, right before he closed the distance. His kiss was like the rest of him, intense, demanding, and incredibly warm. It felt like standing in the sun after a long, freezing night. The world around us, with its invisible ghosts and shadowy dangers, faded entirely. There was only him. A happy, trilling sound broke us apart minutes later. Shirou had flown down from the railing and was hovering between us, glowing brightly and looking incredibly pleased with himself. Genki laughed, resting his chin on top of my head and wrapping his arms securely around my waist. See? Even the bird approves! The next Monday morning, the sun was shining brightly as I walked toward the school gates. The world was still the same. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a gray, transparent figure lingering near a vending machine, trapped in a loop of searching for lost coins. I didn't ignore it out of fear anymore. I simply ignored it because it didn't matter. Because waiting for me at the front gate, leaning casually against the brick pillar, was Genki. He was wearing his leather jacket, looking devastatingly cool and drawing the awestruck, envious stares of every girl walking past. As I approached, his sharp eyes found mine in the crowd. The polite, detached mask he wore for the rest of the world instantly melted away, replaced by a warm, private smile meant only for me. He pushed off the wall, walking toward me and casually intertwining his fingers with mine. On his shoulder, invisible to the jealous whispers and the bustling students, the majestic white bird ruffled its glowing feathers. I wasn't a lure anymore. I didn't have to be afraid of the dark. I squeezed Genki's hand, feeling the solid, reassuring warmth of him, and smiled. Let the girls stare. I had a cool, mysterious boyfriend, a magical spirit-eating bird, and finally, some peace and quiet.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories, twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.